what you got is what you got. And obviously there's secondary buyout market stuff, and I'll leave that up to Chris Mannix, who joins me right now on Twitter at SI Chris Mannix. He's a senior writer for Sports Illustrated, also the host of the Crossover podcast. And Chris, so far, any surprises so far as we head to the deadline for the trade deadline?
I think Chicago's aggressive move to get Nikola Vucevic was something of a surprise. Vucevic was available with Orlando, as we can see the Magic are kind of now going all in on a teardown. But the asking price was believed to be pretty high. It was pretty high. I mean, the Bulls gave up real assets to get Vucevic away, but they believe that having a 30-year-old all-star in Vucevic, a mid-20s all-star in Zach LaVine, that was a pretty good foundation to build on. Other than that, you knew Evan Fournier was going to move. You knew Aaron Gordon was going to move. And now, as we kind of sit here, it's just sort of waiting on Kyle Lowry at this point. And, the Raptors are committed to dealing him in the next 40 minutes. You saw them make the move that sent Norman Powell to Portland. That's a pretty strong indication of their direction. Whether it is, I believe, just the Heat and Lakers are the two teams that are currently bidding. One of those two teams, I believe, will get Kyle Lowry.
What do you think is the compensation for a Kyle Lowry? Because we know the Lakers and a lot of other teams don't necessarily have first-round picks. So what could the compensation be for a Kyle Lowry?
Well, neither the Lakers or Heat have first-round picks they can deal. Miami could get creative a little bit and go to Oklahoma City to try to have some of the protections that are on picks they've traded them in the past lifted. But draft compensation is not going to be the centerpiece of this deal. It's going to be young players, and both the Heat and Lakers have young pieces to offer. The Lakers will include Dennis Schroeder in a deal for Kyle Lowry. Schroeder is having another excellent season after being, I think he was the runner-up for Sixth Man of the Year last year. So that's a piece. But the Raptors are going to hold out. I mean, Talen Horton-Tucker is the jewel of this Lakers young group, and that's someone I believe the Raptors want to get their hands on. And in Miami, while the Heat are willing to deal Duncan Robinson, they are not at this point willing to deal Tyler Hero, because in part Hero is still on that rookie contract. It's a manageable salary, and he's really good. He hasn't had the type of season this year that we saw him have in the bubble, but you're still talking about a 19, 20-year-old guard who can shoot the basketball, and that's not someone that the Heat are looking to part with. So it's a game of cat and mouse that could break any second.
He's a senior writer for Sports Illustrated. He's Chris Mannix, also the host of the Crossover podcast. We're watching kind of the Denver Nuggets make a couple moves today, right? They add JaVale McGee, they add Aaron Gordon, and now you look at this team. Are they really big-time contenders now in the Western Conference? Have they caught sort of the Utah Jazz, the Lakers, the Clippers?
Well, I think they've improved significantly. McGee was a nice small deal. They lost Mason Plumlee in free agency last year and didn't really replace him. So now you get a guy who they're familiar with in Denver, played there a few years or some years back now, and he's got championship experience. So, that's a good guy to have coming off your bench. And the Gordon deal makes a lot of sense. He's a versatile guy, can play 3-4, probably best fit as a four-man right now, who can play alongside Michael Porter or replace him in different lineups. Look, the Nuggets, they saw what they were. They were a team that was good, but not good enough to win a championship this year, which is why they pushed their chips to the middle of the table, put a first-round pick in that package that included Gary Harris, and got that deal done. And now, I don't know where they stand. You have to see how these guys kind of fit in first. But the Nuggets, part of their mindset was that this, at least the Western Conference is pretty wide open right now. I mean, the Lakers, they could wind up in the play-in tournament, depending on how far they fall in the absence of LeBron and Anthony Davis. The Jazz are good, but they're unproven. The Clippers have got problems of their own. There's an opening here for any team that makes the playoffs to come out of the Western Conference, and I think the Nuggets saw that, and that's why they got aggressive in the final hours.
You mentioned playoffs, though, Chris, and for me, a guy whose name is, I think, now starting to hear more and more in the rumors is playoff Rondo, Rajon Rondo. And I know there's some teams that are probably in play for him. Where do you think, or where do you see Rajon Rondo going, maybe at this trade deadline or even in the buyout market?
Well, there have been discussions between the Hawks and the Clippers about a Rondo deal. The Clippers have been proactive in looking for a guard to supplement their backcourt. They've got real problems at the playmaking positions. They rank around the bottom third in the league in assists. Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, these are not playmakers. They're good in their own rights. Williams is a scorer and Beverley's a defender, but they're not playmakers. They need something in that mix. They've talked about Ricky Rubio. He's still available. George Hill was someone on their radar, but he was traded today to Philadelphia. Now you've got Rondo currently in the mix. Rondo would be a good addition for the Clippers. We know about his playoff experience, how he steps up his game every postseason, and he's exactly what the doctor ordered, a guy that can just find Paul George, find Kawhi Leonard, get them easy shots, play well in transition. That would be, I think, a strong and badly needed pickup for the Clippers.
As this trade deadline is approaching, the one thing I'm just kind of been looking at over the last couple of days is that obviously we think it's going to be an NBA Finals between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets. Is there any concern with what's going on in Los Angeles right now with LeBron James? Obviously, his ankle injury, they think he'll return, which he'll be fine. But with Anthony Davis and the caution that they've had, with his injury, does that make the Lakers feel like they may need to make a move, or just kind of hope that the rest that both these guys will get, they'll be ready to go come playoff time?
Well, if you have a chance to add a Kyle Lowry and not give up a Horton Tucker in that deal, you've got to go at least try. I mean, Dennis Schroeder's been excellent for this team. They were 0-4 about a month ago when Schroeder was out in the health and safety protocols.
Right.
His value, there's a numeric number attached to that value. So I think they'd be fine standing pat, but going to get a Kyle Lowry would obviously upgrade that team. I think for the Lakers, it's all about when they get AD and LeBron back and how healthy they are going into the playoffs. If both those guys have a month to shake the rust off and get past their injury problems, Lakers are going to be fine. It doesn't really matter where they finish the season. Home court advantage is largely meaningless this year, even if some fans are allowed to trickle back into most buildings. And the Lakers, in LeBron's career, his teams have won on the road. The Lakers, there's no reason to believe they can't do it either. So to me, it's less about what the Lakers do now, what they do in the buyout market, as just how healthy and how sharp are LeBron and AD come playoff time.
Chris Mannix, senior writer for Sports Illustrated, here on the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison in for Rich. And, there was a news this week that, Kyrie Irving's going to spend a little time away, personal matter, won't, go on a road trip. And then you still have the Kevin Durant situation. They do add Blake Griffin, we know, from the buyout market. But how are we viewing Brooklyn right now? Is it still this process of they're still getting themselves together and don't worry, everything will be fine by the playoffs? Or is it still, are they the favorite in the East and not necessarily the 76ers, who right now currently have the best spot in the Eastern Conference?
No, I think you make Brooklyn the favorite in the East. I mean, the Sixers have been out there scouring the trade market for more backcourt depth. They got George Hill. He's fine, but I'm not sure he's, some kind of difference-making upgrade, whereas the Nets have just kind of sat back and said, we need to get our guys healthy, and then we need to scour the buyout market where they're going to be big players. I mean, one name to watch with the Nets over the next week or so, I think, is going to be J.J. Redick. I mean, J.J. Redick has not played particularly well with the Pelicans. The Pelicans are going nowhere this season. I could see the Pelicans coming to an agreement with Redick for a buyout, and Redick spends his off seasons in Brooklyn. He has a house in Brooklyn, and he would be, I think, an ideal fit with that Nets team, which could use another shooter playing opposite Durant and Kyrie and James Harden. So, the Nets are not doing anything at the trade deadline, but they may not be done. And even if they are done. Having three snipers like Harden, Durant, and Irving, you're just going to be really tough for anybody to beat.
Well, I know whoever gets Andre Drummond, he'll be well rested, right? He hasn't been doing a little bit of anything. But tell me about Andre Drummond. What's it look like over the next couple of days for him?
Well, Drummond is eventually going to get waived or bought out. I mean, there's the question I've been told about how much money Drummond's willing to give back to Cleveland. I'm told nothing at all, and that it may delay that a little bit as they try to work that out. But he'll eventually be a free agent. The marquee teams are going to go after him. The Lakers, I think they might even be able to promise him a starting role with that team, which I think would be appealing to Andre Drummond. The Clippers will make a run at him. The Nets will make a run at him. The Knicks are interesting because the Knicks, from what I'm hearing, the Knicks may be willing to do more than just give Andre Drummond rest of the season type of contract. They may be willing to offer him something with their cap flexibility that extends into next season. If the number's right, that could become appealing to Drummond. It's a weird offseason this year where not a ton of teams have cap space, and even more, the teams that do aren't looking to spend on Andre Drummond. Like Oklahoma City is not going to chase Andre Drummond this offseason. So I keep one eye on the Knicks as far as Drummond goes. If they're willing to go into a second year at a reasonable number, that could be enough to entice Drummond away from one of the projected title contenders.
Is there any other names on that buyout market that we should be aware of? Because in the buyout market, you're just grabbing guys. They're more depth than anything. They're not going to change the way your roster or how you play the game, but any more depth guys that we should keep an eye out for?
Well, LaMarcus Aldridge is the big name that'll be out there at some point. He'll get a buyout from San Antonio. I've been told Miami is in a strong position there. Phoenix would be a team to watch with Aldridge as well. He almost signed there back in 2015, and that's a team obviously on the rise that could use him. But I think with the way Miami is made up, Aldridge could step in there and I think have a big role with that team, whether it's backing up Bam Adebayo, playing alongside him. I think Miami's in a good position for LaMarcus Aldridge.
Senior writer for Sports Illustrated, Chris Mannix, joining the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison here filling in for Rich. Kind of get your opinion on this one, Chris, because I think last year the NBA wanted to see how it would work, and that play-in sort of tournament format, it gave you something. Maybe it might have been the best basketball, but it gave you something, and I thought it entertained me. And to see them going back to it again this year and to seeing what it has done for a team like the Chicago Bulls, who any other year they're probably worried about next season. But because they have an opportunity to have a chance to make the true playoffs and not just the play-in, do you think the NBA is now getting it right? They like this when they want to keep it going and moving forward?
I think there'll be some modifications to it if it exists beyond this year. The play-in tournament has been really good. It's been fun. It's also kind of slowed the trade deadline down a little bit because there are teams out there like a Sacramento and others that, are within, shouting distance of that play-in tournament, and that makes them less likely to kind of tear things down and make a deal. I don't think you'll have 10 teams have an opportunity. I think that'll be whittled down. I think you'll probably could see 9 teams be in the mix, but only if that 9th team is within like one game or 2 games of that 8th and final playoff spot. It's not going to be a situation where, the top 8 are teams with above 500 records and the 9th seed team is below 500, but they have a chance to get in the playoff to the play. And there'll be some tweaks to it, but I do think some version of it is probably here to stay because it does make the end of the season a lot more compelling. And the NBA's had a problem with that historically, where in the last month of the season, you've got teams tanking, you've got just bad basketball overall. This will at least increase in some level the quality of the game in the final months.
Last question before I let you go, Chris. I know I was with some friends this weekend, and we were just talking about basketball, and we were talking about just the NBA's Rookie of the Year. I know LaMelo Ball is going to probably be out for the season, be reevaluated after having the wrist surgery, but right now, who is your Rookie of the Year in the NBA?
Well, LaMelo, as we sit, is a clear Rookie of the Year. The question is going to be, will he be that in a month and a half? Patrick Ewing has the lowest number of games played to win Rookie of the Year. That was 50 back in 1986. LaMelo will, of course, finish below that if he's done for the season. But the competition is not great. I mean, Anthony Edwards has had a solid year with Minnesota, but you can certainly argue that there's a lot of empty calories there for a bad Minnesota team. James Wiseman's had his moments. Tyrese Halliburton has had his moments. I think voters, and I'm one of them, are going to have to decide if, kind of the way LaMelo played for 41 games carries more value than the way other players played for 60 or 70 games or whatever they finish with at the end of the season. I put a lot of value in players that impact winning, and there's no question LaMelo impacted winning in his 41 games with the Charlotte Hornets. And if you look around, none of the other guys did. I mean, the players that we're talking about, the teams that they're on, not very good in general. So I lean towards LaMelo regardless of if he's out for the season, but it's a very fluid situation. You could see Anthony Edwards go on the kind of tear that kind of forces you to vote for him. Same thing with Halliburton. If the Kings can get back in the playoff mix, there's a lot of variables still in play there.
Yeah, but this is a real time. This is why we call it live radio, live television, Chris, because as we've been speaking, the Clippers have made that deal for Rajon Rondo. They give up Lou Williams. So Williams for Rondo, I guess in 2 second-round picks. Just your live reaction and thoughts on the trade.
I had no surprise that the Clippers found a playmaker. It was priority number one for them, over the last few days. Williams could be an interesting name in the buyout market if he's not rerouted in a trade, which we're getting damn close to the end of the deadline. Right. You could see Williams bought out, and look, he's a former Sixth Man of the Year winner who can score. So there will be a market for Lou Williams as a buyout candidate if the Hawks part ways with him.
Well, I guess there's going to be a lot to talk about on the crossover podcast with you and Howard Beck. So make sure you all listen to that, man. Appreciate the time, Chris.
You got it. No problem.
Yeah, that's Chris Mannix, senior writer for Sports Illustrated at SI Chris Mannix on Twitter, and the co-host with Howard Beck of the Crossover Podcast.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.